So basically what I wanted to do today is Julie and I'm trying to look at two screens, so I'm sorry. Julie and I had sent out a working group framework that we just wanted to go over with everybody and make sure that we're in agreement on a good way to proceed. And so, where'd it go? There it is. So the first item was that we thought that this larger group is a little bit harder to put so many people together, and it's hard to get this many people to do work outside of the group meeting. That what we would do is use this meeting as brainstorming and getting feedback from everybody. And then the staff, meaning myself, Melissa, Julie, Carolyn, Nina, Karen Mullins, and Kelly, Mike Cronin, and Dave Pinsino. Dave's not on yet either. Would go back and do research on items and then bring whatever findings we have back to the full group for discussion so that we can begin moving some things forward. We also, Julie and I had a question, there's Dr. Hackett, about whether the high school visioning work that was done a few years back, whether that was still relevant or whether it needed to be updated or reviewed, whether that was still appropriate. At the time, we were talking about the Article 25 group and how that would intersect with this, but that's hopefully no longer an issue since they have indicated they wanted to IP their article. And then to have some more discussions about the limitations of Article 97 and begin having some discussions about delving into what land will be used and what won't be used and what's off the table. We also thought it would be useful to have a separate meeting with the school committee and the recreation committee, just to make sure that they're both talking. Hang on a second, I'm going to close my door.
I don't think as panelists we can control bringing anyone over to attendee, but Dave Pinsino's on the line. So I don't know if anyone else has that ability to move him over to panelist.
Who is?
He is here.
Dave? I have the ability to do that.
Oh, great. Thanks, Jim.
Let me find him. There he is. Okay, he should be joining us as a panelist now. There. I don't see him, but oh, there he is. Sorry about that. I've now lost my place. Oh, so the next issue was setting up the meeting with just the school committee and the recreation committee. And then we also wanted to have a discussion about whether or not we really believed the center recreation area bathrooms were under any threat from the school building project, which of course we wrote this several weeks ago. Now we're right up against town meeting. And I've repeatedly said, I don't think that a 3 or 4 story building will be built 16 feet from a property line. That it's unlikely that the public restrooms there will be demolished as part of the high school, any high school project. And then there were some questions. Karen was going to do some additional research into the wetlands mapping and provide some additional information to us on that. And then we also thought at one point in time it would be worthwhile, maybe when the weather's a little bit nicer, to take a site walk so that everybody is really familiar with perhaps where all of the property is. And I don't know, one of the questions I was going to ask Dave Pinsino at this meeting is whether or not when the survey work was done, whether they put any stakes out or whether we would be able to have our engineering department to at least roughly put out where some of the stakes are, where the property lines are. I think it would be really useful for us to visually see on the ground where some of those property bounds are of land that's under Article 97 and then land that is not under Article 97. And that's pretty much, what I thought we would try to do as far as a framework. Actually, it's not just me, it's what Julie Hackett and I discussed when Julie and I got together about a month ago after our last meeting. And so just wanted to make sure that people were comfortable with that, or if there were other suggestions or other ideas of things that we should be doing as part of the whole review. I know a lot of it will actually be a little bit difficult until we have some additional work done as far as what the feasibility is of where the school is going to be located, what size the footprint it's going to be, and all of that information. It's going to be hard to figure some of that out, but at least if we can figure out what land is available for schools and have that discussion, and then figure out of the land really, I guess at some point we need to discuss, is the center track off the table, or is that on the table? If the tennis court's on the table, off the table, what about the pool? If we start taking some things off the table and limit where the scope of where the project may go, I think that might be really helpful too. So with that, anybody feel free to talk at any moment. Everybody's on mute except for me. Go ahead, Doug.
Jim, this is Dave.
Yes.
Yeah, so they didn't leave any of the stakes out just because of the high use over there. But if we have about a week before we know we're going to do a site visit, we can get something up that kind of shows the boundaries.
Okay. Let's make a note of that. David Cantor.
Hi, Jim. I know we're supposed to be just on the wall. The only thing I'd say in your framework, I would greatly appreciate under number 10, if you would include the finance committees perhaps in the results that have come out from the meetings, as opposed to us having to go look for them.
Yep.
Thank you.
Susie.
Thank you, Jim. I was wondering if you had the map that you could share screen with, or if you want to pull that up and come back to me, that's fine.
Yeah, I will. I dug out the hard copy. See if I can find it real quick, because I do have an electronic version of it.
So I can ask my question without it.
Okay,
And this is,
I got
I
it.
guess this is kind of directed for Mina. My recollection from looking at the map, and it's been a while since I've looked at it, is that we might actually be using land for school purposes that is actually classified as Article 97. So I didn't know if we had to go do any correction work on that, as well as the process we're going through.
Susie, I don't remember it. I think what you're talking about is a very small encroachment from the existing school building. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah. The short answer is I don't think you need to do any correction on its own where you are about to start a new process. It is something that it's not uncommon when the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, who handles Article 97 requests before they go to the legislator, tries to clean up existing encroachments and existing issues. The sort of point one, point two, and we learned this recently on another matter, it's sometimes the case that the land already had an encroachment when it was acquired. And so sort of part of the Article 97 restriction includes that. I don't think that was the case here, but I don't know for sure. We'd have to be looking at aerial photographs from the time of acquisition, et cetera. So short answer is, it's certainly something that in the process of doing other Article 90, getting other Article 97 relief, we'd want to clean up. If no Article 97 relief ends up being requested at the end of this, once the proposal's all put together, then we might want to think about cleaning just that part up.
Okay, and then my second question is, if we do need to do some Article 97 work here, which I believe I understand to be a 1-for-1 swap, does it have to be, does it have to be school land? Because I know we have some land that's labeled as school land and some that's just municipal land, or can it be either or does it have to be a particular type?
That's a good question. From EEA, I mean, again, this is the EEA policy, and most of you were on this call before, is really a way to guide the legislators' review. I mean, the legislator could pass it with or without any one-to-one swap, and it's sort of the state policy, though, to make sure it's not misused. From the state's perspective, it has more to do with the quality of the parkland being given as opposed to where it came from. So they're not concerned whether it's private land, school land, other municipal land, et cetera. Their concern is making sure that at the end of the day, the public ends up with roughly the same amount of accessible open space and parkland.
Okay, thank you.
Susie, on your initial question, if you can you see where the little hand is on the map? This area right here is where there is a school building that goes on to the Article 97 land. Right in here. So, or right here, I guess it is too. So there's some areas that there definitely is an issue there.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we're being efficient and doing, if we need to do cleanup, make sure that's part of this process as well. So, we do it once.
So, Doug, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So I'm not sure how widely this was shared with everybody, but on your weekly update on March 18th, you'd shared with the board the deed for Hastings Park. I know Hastings Park had been, at least came up in some conversations as, what about that, and using that as a potential, area for a potential high school project. So I don't know if you wanted to get this group up to speed on that, or if we could maybe share the information you found.
Yeah.
Research.
So from the deed on that parcel, which was from like 1897, when the land was granted to the town, it was such that it was always to be parkland, and that if it was ever to be constructed on, the land would revert to the Cary Memorial Library. And so Corn Stembridge is already planning a children's library there. And so if we have any intent on using it for high school purposes, which I don't think we would, it's going to be a children's library. So that is definitely off the table because it has a restriction on it. And I don't, although some of the other land is under Article 97, Mina, I don't know if in any of the research that Anderson Krieger did, whether or not any of the other land had any type of deed restriction that would be in addition to Article 97 that would further restrict the ability to use any of that land. And we should probably figure that out and by parcel, because now we've got the survey, we could, black off parcels if they're untouchable.
Yeah, Jim, I think we'd want to revisit it to confirm. My recollection is, other than Article 97 issues, the only other thing that came up is there's one parcel of land that's owned by the Rex, or was given for the rec center, that actually contemplates being turned into school land. So it was a restriction, but it was a helpful one because it was already reducing the Article 97 piece. I don't remember any other that added a layer other than what you just mentioned for the library.
Okay. If you could just take a quick look at that maybe before our next meeting, just so that we have that confirmed and we know which one was contemplated as potentially being used for school land. I think that's on the other map that, like the hand-drawn map that you had provided initially. Might be highlighted on there.
Yes, I think it is. Yeah. It's the one that has the most words next to it, if that makes sense. That's my very strong legal opinion on that. So
Maybe used. Okay, yeah, it's got it's the one with the dots on it. So I have to stare at this for a while to figure out where everything is again. So it's really on that map that I had up before. Let's put it back up. It's an area that is, I believe, right in here is where it's at. It's not this full triangle here, but it's like a small area here. And then land over here. No, land over here. The swamp looks like. So we'll have to look at that in a little bit greater detail and make sure that we have that straight. So just to start off, maybe Karen, did you get a chance to do any of the go through any of the wetlands mapping in that area?
So, so I did a high-level GIS map, and I kind of traced the areas because they're not already shown on the town GIS map. But if you allow me to share my screen, I can kind of bring it up.
Okay. I think it's set up for all panelists.
Oh, yep. Thank you.
Okay, so you should be able to.
So in this area, you have wetlands that don't come up on the layer. Then there's this pocket of wetlands, a pocket of wetlands here, this wetlands here. There's a narrow stream wetland here. And then across the street, I think this is school property too. There's wetlands in this area. And then there's also the piped Vinebrook system that actually runs through this way and cuts across. And I just bring that up because that is the main branch of the Vinebrook that it's not jurisdictional because it's greater than 200 linear feet, but it would, you know, if a structure was going to go here, it would need to be relocated in some fashion.
Doug, did you have a question?
Yeah, Jim, I just wanted to point out, and Karen just pointed it out as well, the land across the street on Worthen Road, which is designated as school land. I think for whatever discussion purposes we have going forward, I think that should be included in the discussion map. And I know you had an earlier map up that showed, you know, here's the highlighted area we're talking about. In my view, we should also be including that in our discussions when we talk about possibilities of where something could go or using that for whatever project may or may not happen. I think, you know, as I understand the group and the purpose of this group is we're trying to set some realistic legal boundaries of what can and can't happen. But I think as, you know, if we're being imaginative, there's some opportunity I see for that parcel to, which we already own, to be part of this project.
Yeah, and if nothing else, it might be land that could be used for the laydown area or storage of material for parking or something like that. So Karen, I think a really good part of the discussion could center around where the Vinebrook is underground there, because moving, maybe you could even discuss if you're aware of what it would, and it might take some info from Dave Pinsino as well, would be involved in actually moving a brook that then also deposits and creates this wetlands that's on the other side of Worthen Road on that map.
Yeah, I mean, it would need detailed engineering study to see how you could relocate it, because right now, the old Vine Brook comes through here. And so that's where it enters. So if you're gonna relocate it, you almost would have to create a stream channel coming in from another area. And then you also have to look at how groundwater is feeding it. Because by piping it, you've actually blocked off the groundwater recharge.
Yeah. So that's about where the pipe goes, where they.
Right, yeah, right through
right now.
in this general area. And then it runs down the northerly side of Park Road. And it goes all the way through here and outlets into the Vine Brook right here, past the Arts and Crafts Society.
Okay. So for people who are on this call, I mean, does the Vine Brook location, does that seem to be a line in the sand not to cross? I mean, without doing something really dramatic. I mean, moving a brook is not a small task. And I think no matter where you move it, you're either going to move it and disrupt the recreational facilities, or you're going to move it and further impinge where the school building could go. So that's why I'm asking, just looking at where it's located on the overall parcel. Nobody wants to venture. Dr. Hackett, actually, Susie Berry, you had your hand up first. Why don't you?
Oh, thanks, Jim. So I had a question just based on the map, but I'll come back to your question later, if that's okay.
Okay.
So Karen, thank you for showing the wetlands. That's really helpful. But a couple of questions here. I'm curious because when they redid the Worthing roadside parking lot, they made some changes over there. Didn't they replicate wetlands? So you don't have to show replicated wetlands. Yeah,
So
it's-
if you're talking about maybe
Yep.
this little pocket, so
Yeah.
that was designed as a stormwater feature. So
Okay.
those can be altered. They're
Okay.
not considered like what protected wetlands at this point. They're more stormwater features. And so
Okay.
you would have to look at that when you're rebuilding to make sure that you're managing the stormwater.
Okay, so a follow-up to question to that, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but
Yeah.
can you give us kind of a wetlands for dummies version of, so we have these blue spots on the map here. Can we not touch them? Can we move them? Can we replicate them? What are kind of the high level rules surrounding that?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So under the State Wetlands Protection Act, each type of resource area has performance standards. So in this case, if they're bordering vegetated wetlands, there's strict standards regarding if you propose to alter them, then you have to replicate them. And your limit is 5,000 square feet. Otherwise, you have to go to the state for variance. And then when you replicate, you have to look for areas that have the same type of hydrology that can support the same type of system. So, and then under the local bylaw, the commission requires it to be 2-to-1. So every 1 square foot of wetlands you alter, you actually have to reconstruct 2 square feet. And the reason behind that is replication areas aren't as successful. So it's just more of a guarantee that you would get back the amount of wetlands that are altered.
I think that's helpful. So do we have a sense of those 4 light blue spots that are on the current high school property? How many square feet that is?
Square feet, I don't, but I can figure it out.
Okay, and then just one last question here. So we're showing wetlands, but are there any other issues with this entire site that you see in terms of topography, like the hill behind the field house where we currently see a bunch of trees? Is that ledge, do we know? Are there any other challenges that we need to be aware of on this site in addition to the Vine Brook?
So that I don't know. I don't know if it's been investigated when they renovated the school the last time and did additions in the late 90s. So I don't know if any soil borings or anything were done there that would let you know about ledge. I do know the whole entire site has high groundwater that can be difficult, especially if you're trying to manage for stormwater. And another thing, just with the Vinebrook being closed, the groundwater kind of sits there because it can't recharge the stream. So, you know, that's something to consider. Would it help the hydrology in the area by actually daylighting the stream? But
Thank you, that was helpful.
Would make left field a little wet. Dr. Hackett?
Hi, thank you. Just want to mention a comment about process and thinking about the limitations that we have on the site and people's individual interests. And obviously, we all come from different perspectives, and, you know, kind of putting up, school can't go here because we have this building, this field, this wetland, limits what we can do with a significantly large project. So 400 million, maybe 350 million, wherever we land. So I'm just advocating for also thinking about what if there were no limitations, where would we place the school? What would it look like? And my sense from working on other Article 97 issues is you can work around those challenges. Mina could say if that's not correct, but I think there are ways around the obstacles. So I just want to encourage us to think from all perspectives.
Kathleen?
Yeah, I was going to say something similar to what Dr. Hackett said, and that, you know, we are going to be building what is one of the largest high schools in the state, which is unusual for a community of about 34,000 people. And I think that's something I think that often a lot of people in Lexington don't understand, that our peer communities, high schools are much, much smaller than ours. And given the pretty intense limitations we have, I wouldn't really want to take anything off the table in terms of something we look at as difficult as moving a stream would be. And I really, I'm not an engineer, I don't know what goes into that, but I wouldn't want to limit ourselves at this point, because like I said, that the high school will be very big. It's already challenging enough without taking some things off the table.
Yeah, I would say where the 3 wetlands are with the blue areas, that pretty much impinges on the entire thing, that it's either on one side or the other side of that. And then when you have where the brook is on the other side, that impinges on what's available even more so. Because no matter where you move it, it's going to be disruptive. Pika?
Just a quick clarifying question. So the roads that are feeder roads into our school, for which is used by traffic and all, those roads, the tarmac is not holy ground, right? If needed, we can move those roads if the construction, or we decide that the school is to be placed thus or another way.
Some roads could probably be moved, but not a lot, not where there are houses. So Worthern Road, part of it could be maybe moved on the triangle that the town owns. Well, we own both of them, but one of them is a giant wetlands. And I think that would be very difficult to move. Plus you've got private property here on the curve. I'm pointing at it with my pointer, and I know that you're not
Right here.
seeing it now that I'm saying that.
Right. But I'm thinking of the roads like which the little cul-de-sac that services the fields, and then is it called Parker Lane or whatever, that services just the back end of houses, and those I think can be considered a part of the lot, right? And
Why don't we do this? Karen, why don't you stop sharing for a moment? And I think just a simple roadmap of that area is actually going to be easier to look at. Let me just get it up here real quick.
And I'll just finish my question as we're looking for that, is that if we have to think of the roads as available square footage, A lot of them are abutting those blue conservation lands. So does that preclude us touching that tarmac or not? And then I have an observation, a quick observation after that.
So ask that question again. I'm sorry, it was.
All I was saying is, like, you have Park Drive and then you have that little cul-de-sac. It's not a whole lot of land, but I'm just thinking that land which does not which borders the back of homes, that land can be reconfigured, right? Can be considered as part of available land, even though it borders some of the conservation blue spots that Ms. Karen showed in her map.
Well, I think that probably is on the table. Those roads, like this road right here,
Right.
this whole area, except for where there are wetlands, which is like in this area.
So I was just concerned that if we begin to touch any of that, the wetlands would say you can't grandfather or use some of that space. So that was my concern. It doesn't have to be answered yet. It's just a consideration.
Yeah.
And my quick observation was that I was just trying to think through if, say 1929, God willing, that's when we open the new building.
2029.
Huh?
2029.
Yeah,
You said 19.
sorry, I'm still in the last century. That's okay. 2029. If we were to do that, there will be, at least for 3 years, students in the building who would be facing or hearing construction, etc. So I know we're figuring out land and all, but we also have to think about the needs of the kids who are in school while construction is going on, and how we educate them while there's a lot of disruption. So that's, again, just an observation. Thank you.
So just because that's like a segue into a conversation that Dr. Hackett and I had when we did have a meeting, is whether or not there's value to seeking an off-site location for the students while the construction was going on, because that would obviously free up the current building space, and it would possibly, and I would let Mike Cronin weigh in on this, it would make it a quicker project and probably a cheaper project, because it would be quicker and easier for a contractor to go in and do demolition and build a new building. And then it might also free up the conversation we're having. It may provide additional alternatives and opportunities. We would, of course, have to find a place to house a lot of students. If they were all in one place, maybe they wouldn't be. And that would certainly be a challenge, but that would be one option to address both what Topeka just said, but it would also maybe make the project a little bit more economical, and so that it was completed in a more timely manner.
I think you should not ask Mike Cronin that when he's driving in a car. That's a really tough question.
I'm parked up front.
Okay. Be safe.
So there's really two approaches, Jim. I think there's the renovation of the existing building. You would definitely not want to do that work while students are on site or on property. The intermingling between construction, vehicles, and students has often been not as successful as we would have liked. And it takes far more time and far more money. If we were to, say, build a building on the other side of the property, and the kids were not and the students and staff were not on the existing property, and they were off-site, we would be able to do the construction of the new facility at the same time, do the demolition and the reconstruction of the field / parking lot area simultaneously. So that would indeed make the project faster, and the less time, the less money we're going to wind up spending as a community. So that would be beneficial to the project and the timeline for sure.
It would be interesting at one point in time as we progress to take a look at what the cost benefit analysis would be of the cost of leasing space or creating space versus what might be saved by having a shorter time period and a a lesser construction cost, because then you have the added benefit of, while they may not be, on the high school property, it would be a shorter time period, and the students wouldn't have to put up with the construction noise throughout the entire project. And I'm not going to even pretend that I have an idea of where that could be. I don't know if there's property available or will be available when we get into construction, because we don't know now to say 2026 or whenever construction would be happening. We don't know what would be available at that point in time. And there, the only places I can think that are large enough are either on like Hayden Avenue or one of the Shire buildings, or something on Hartwell or something like that. But I don't know of any other building in town that would be sufficiently sized. And maybe you put them in 2 or 3 different places. I don't know. That's to me, that is a school committee and a Dr. Hackett question, not a Jim Malloy question. I'm just raising it as an opportunity, if we were to move the students off site, that perhaps that would give us greater flexibility on how we look at this parcel. Kathleen?
Can I just
yeah.
weigh in quickly, Kathleen? I won't take much time. That is an option that we can consider. I just want to be clear that it's a very difficult option, and one that I don't know that this community would tolerate. We have science labs and athletics and all of the things that kids are looking forward to on the heels of a 2-year, well, we're still in it, on the heels of a pandemic where people already feel they were losing out. So I think that would be a really tough sell.
Yeah, I'm
well-
not saying it wouldn't be.
Yeah, well, I will say, I would say it's an impossible sell in this community. I mean, and it did see even entertain. Remember, our students, it's not like you can just divide them up and say, oh, the 9th graders go over here. The kids take classes with kids in all different grades. I mean, and I don't even mean the arts classes or the choruses and the music program. I mean, you have kids from different grades in the same math classes. In other areas. So that would be very interesting to see people's reaction to that.
And Mike, can you just refresh my memory, the size building that this is projected to be? Do you?
So right now, this building is about 325,000 square feet, and given the staff and the population, we think it's going to be roughly 425,000 square feet. But again, a study will further that number along and make sure that it's the accurate number.
Yep. Okay. So it would have to be one large building.
Or a connected building with a bunch of wings on it, perhaps. But yes, it'll be a larger, singular footprint type building.
I was just thinking if there was one site somewhere in town, it would have to be one large building. Just based on what Kathleen just said. Rick, I think you had your hand up next.
Thank you very much. Rick DeAngelis, Chair of the Recreation Committee. First, thank you very much, Jim and Dr. Hackett, for arranging the working group, and in particular this meeting, and including Recreation as one of the stakeholders. Not to get ahead of ourselves, or at least speaking for Recreation, not to get ahead of ourselves. The recreation resources that we represent are vital to the community needs at large. I don't think anybody in their right mind, and I assume we're all of right mind and sound mind, are against education. We're all for it. I have a couple of great friends who are retired school superintendents. Spoke to one this morning from Dartmouth, Massachusetts, who was my mentor at Holy Cross, as a matter of fact, Tom Kelly. You may know him, Dr. Hackett. He knew of you and speaks very highly of you. But in any event, in the planning process, let's not lose sight of the need to plan for replication of recreation facilities that might, with a final plan, get taken, if you will, for the school building. Don't want to see recreation resources lost or become the stepchild of unintended consequences of moving forward with a new high school, which is certainly needed. So that's the comment I would have. And like Ms. Lenahan and Dr. Hackett herself, nothing is off the table. And therefore, let's put this on the table, that we keep a good eye out for the recreation resources that we all use in the community. Thank you.
Topeka?
I thought Kathleen was before me, but just very quickly, for Article 97, when we are thinking of land swaps and all, is there any way to promise future land? Because say if the school is built in a place other than the current location, then is there a way to promise, like when the old school is demolished or whatever, then that you get more land, which is right, conservation adjacent, et cetera, or it has to happen before?
So and I'll let Mina answer this, but the question is, if we were to say build, let's just say where the track is right now, just for the sake of it. And that's under Article 97. But then when we demolished the school, we were putting that land under Article 97. Is that the one-to-one kind of trade? Mina, can you weigh in on that? I think that's probably workable, isn't it? Has Mina left the building? We'll have to get back to you on that, Topeka. But I think that that's probably workable, but I think it probably has to be done in such a way that the land would be made to be usable parkland. I don't think it could just be, parking lots or junk land or something like that. It would have to be turned into parkland or recreational facilities or something.
I think Mike knows the answer to that question, don't you, Mike?
The answer is yes. It would have to be equal use. So if we displace an Article 97 field that just happens to be a baseball field, we would put back the same square footage on the other side for the same type of use. If you want to convert it to a soccer field, that's still the same kind of use, but it's still the recreational activities.
And I think to that point, it's, and Karen, we can probably clarify that it's recreation, active or passive, and what we would be restricted with the wetlands. So even though it looks like you could replace the land, we may not be able to replace the use of the land based on that. So the active versus passive will be important when we're looking at any swaps or exchanges.
Doug?
Jim, did you say my name?
Yes, Doug, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I didn't hear it. I'll just reiterate, I think it was said several times already, but I think now's not the time to take anything off the table, including, could we move a wetland if we had to? Could we temporarily have space for students that is not on this land? I think we've been making a mistake to say we're not considering any of those options, as difficult as all of them are. That's I think part of the process we're going through now, but also the part of the conversation we need to have with the community at large, right? I think the more we can establish these data points and get people's opinions and thoughts, the better off we'll be in a position to do what we think the community really wants. I would just hate for us to get into this group think and have someone say, oh, we can't do that at all. And then we sort of eliminate it, even though it might not sound favorable at this moment in time. I just don't want us to get trapped in any of these situations where we can't do something. I think it's when we really can't do something because we don't own the land, or it's completely illogical that, for example, we'll buy every house on Parker Street or something like that. I don't think that's a realistic solution. But anything that's within our power, I think we should keep mindful of at this point, not eliminate it, and just really get that feedback from the community on what would serve the students best and what would serve the community best. Thank you.
Jim, can I ask a quick question? So in terms of process and knowing people have different interests and things that they would like to see. Do you think that at some point, maybe drawing up schematics of options that do what the stakeholders in this group want it to do would be useful, and then kind of identifying pros and cons of each? So Rec, we know, is worried, we're all worried about taking down projects that were just put up and that kind of thing. But, you know, talking about that as an interest and seeing where we would place the school if that were the case could be useful. Talking about the wetland issue. And so having, you know, 3, 4, 5 options, just so that we can start to get a visual and start to understand this is the benefit, this is the deficit of that particular idea. And then having somebody who is like, not me, someone who's skilled in drawing up the schematics and just as sort of simple design and able to give some insight. And then we could identify those Article 97 issues that could be difficult and have a more informed discussion about next steps.
That's great, because I was just going to talk about what we could do for next steps. So it's
Good.
Mike, there's just one mic on this call, right? Yes. Okay. Mike, could you give us maybe just an idea of what that would take to do some sort of schematics and who we might be able to do that kind of work for us? And
So, you know, you're really talking about the feasibility study.
I know I am. And so in my head, I'm sitting here thinking, how does this start to blend with the feasibility study and the creation of a school building committee and this working group's role and trying, because this working group is a broader group than what will be on the school building committee. And so how does the role of this working group then help facilitate some of the discussion that the school building committee will have?
And I don't think it has to be feasibility, Mike. I mean, I think it's a step down from feasibility. It doesn't have to be that involved. Just what would it look like? What are the possibilities? Who does some design work? Who could come up with, you know, some useful thinking about what the options could be so that we could react to all of them?
And Dr. Hackett, you're just thinking if you were to plop down like a footprint of
Yeah.
the building.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
areas, how would it be? Where would it be?
Exactly. Just to get the discussion going, because we're going to have some hard conversations that have to happen. And kind of the sooner that we get it out there and we're able to process and step away from it and think and get more input, I think the more beneficial it will be in the long run.
So I think we have the ability to be able to come up with some very rough concepts that would be able to, for instance, plop a building in this particular location here, or this is about the square footage of the parking that might be necessary. And this is what we currently have for square footage of park and recreation space. This is how it would be replicated perhaps on another portion of the site. I think we have the ability to pull very rough, don't hold me to it kind of drawings and kind of present that to the group and say, here is some concepts that could be available.
And just to be clear, add Jim's concept of what would it look like if kids moved? I mean, everything on the table, every idea, so that we can come up with the best solution.
Got it.
And then it also becomes a discussion of at some point in time, and this will be more of a school building discussion, but it also falls into this, is if it's a 3-story, if it's a 425,000 square foot building, if it's 3 stories, it's simple math. If it's 4 stories, it's simple math about the size of each plate and what it's going to be. I mean, a 4-story building is still going to be a little over 100,000 square feet of footprint. So you have to think of it in that sort of a massing and scale in that area. And so that would be like 3 acres, right? Mike, is that about right? About 3 acres of land.
Yeah, I mean, if you built a rectangular box that's 400,000 square feet, replicating the floors all the way up, that's right. It's 144,000 square feet per acre. So, right, the math is right on.
but remembering that typical designers, you'll have a smaller footprint at the top for, say, the science labs, et cetera. And then you kind of tear it down where the first floor will clearly be the widest, biggest square footage on the property. But yeah, we can, I can do all those little pieces, sure. I'll make that happen.
And it still casts a mighty shadow. Right? That's big.
So just to give you, that doesn't look right. Never mind. I'm not going to show it. I just drew a polygon on the map of what 3 acres looks like. So you can get a ballpark idea, but it looks smaller than the existing school, but that's because it's based on the number of stories. So that's what the lines aren't quite straight because I just did it really quickly, but that's 2.9 acres. An acre is about 44,000 something square feet, or 43,560. Mike, I think that's in your ballpark.
But it's about 44,000 square feet for an acre.
Yeah. So that's about 125,000 square foot footprint. So you can see how you can just move that around the lot. I just drew it on there for the heck of it, just in one spot. So why don't, for next steps, because I want to be cognizant of everybody's time and schedule, including my own, and I have 4 o'clock. So I think for our next meeting, perhaps first we should have a discussion about maybe scheduling a regular meeting so that everybody can put that as a plan, and Kathy doesn't have to try to round everybody up. And then maybe for our next meeting, we could ask DPF to do a couple of footprints that we can all react to and start having a conversation about what seems to make the most sense. And maybe we can have Karen and maybe our town engineer, John Livesey, do a little bit more research into what it really takes to move a brook. Because I think it's probably a lot more substantial than any of us are thinking. I don't know that the Mass DEP is going to allow us just to move a brook for convenience purposes. Doug, did you have a comment?
Yeah, just one comment, question, request is if we're doing any back of the envelope sketches, we include the concept of parking requirements, because parking, there's so much of that land is paved, and I think also on the table, is a parking garage appropriate? Is underground parking appropriate? Is rooftop parking? I mean, I have no idea,
Yeah.
but I'd hate to us give commentary on something that's not realistic if there's no parking involved, because it's not realistic that the teachers come to school without a car, or students for that matter, who park everywhere, and they're constant, it's a constant issue for the town. So just want to throw that out there if there's any schematics that get included. Thanks.
Okay.
So Doug, I want to be clear. We're looking for replicating the same number of parking spaces that I have on the ground now. I'm not going to incorporate parking on roofs or parking garages as part of any concept, correct?
I guess the back of the envelope, as I heard Jim and Julie sort of say, is it's us being imaginative with put the building here, put the building there. What are all the pluses and minuses? Parking is part of that formula. So I would say everything's on the table. What I don't know, and I'm not the expert, is what's the average vehicles per student ratio or vehicles per teacher ratio. I don't know how that gets calculated at a high school. All I know is we don't have enough parking and they all park on the street, which is fine for some overflow, but I think it's just something a discussion we have to have as this group, because I hear about it every day at home, and I'm sure many of you do too. Parking's a problem.
And that actually is part of the feasibility study. So the engineers will work on those designs, but we should consider it as we do the sketches.
If you look at I'm not sharing anymore. I'm losing my space where I'm sharing, and I'm not sharing. but I just outlined the existing parking and it's roughly 5 acres. This and this over here. So you've got 3 acres going to a building and 5 acres going to parking. So we do have a couple of people who are attendees that have their hand up. I'm going to take the top 3. I'm not going to take more than that because we've got some time limitations here. So first I'll let Ann Eccles talk. And you should be able to unmute yourself.
I believe I have. Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Great. So I'm Ann Eccles. I live at 49 Parker Street, and actually the corner of Parker and Clark. And so I wanted to introduce myself. The neighborhood is actually an listed historic neighborhood. And we are organized, obviously, on this issue, and we'll be attending everything. The overflow parking, we're very well aware of. The traffic, more concentrated in the morning, less in the afternoons, is a huge factor in how you handle, this old neighborhood, and where you're placing it so much closer now to it will be a factor. But while I was listening to this, as a landscape architect, I can certainly tell you that it is surprisingly difficult to move, especially, I think it was done in the 1930s, the Vinebrook. So that will be a cost that should certainly be calculated. And the hydrology of the area, as you mentioned earlier, as someone who lives right here, it was all swampland and marshland. It's great soil, but it's wet. They'll dig a little bit and find water. So that will certainly be a factor, just so you know.
Yep, thank you, Ann. Natalie, and then I'll let Dave talk too. And so go ahead, Natalie.
Oh, I think I must have accidentally hit it. So please ignore me. I apologize.
Okay, thank you for your question. Then we'll let Dave Armstrong speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Dave Armstrong. I live at 21 Hayward Avenue. I'm on the Electric and Bicycle Advisory Committee. I just want to say, I hope that a consideration that we can keep in mind is alternative transportation options for students and staff at the high school, walking and biking, et cetera, both during construction and after construction. I will leave it at that. I know we'll have more time to talk about these things later. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, so we've got 2 kind of big tasks before the next meeting, and I know
Excuse
Alan.
me, Jim.
Yes.
Sorry, it's Susie. Alan Levine from Appropriation has had his hand up for quite a while.
I was just going to say, I know Alan's got his hand up.
Thanks. I just wanted to make a very simple request. I'm sorry, I'm a latecomer to this process, so I'm not versed in the Article 97 issues, and I'd like to find out if there's a way I can be brought up to speed offline. That's it.
Okay, Alan, how about if Mina and I maybe reach out to you and have a conversation?
That would be great. Thank you.
We had one at the earlier meeting. And so the 2 big tasks I see for staff to look into and get back for our next meeting is to get some conceptual footprints with parking involved, and then also to do research into what it really takes to move a brook and a wetlands, I think, because I think both are pretty significant. I know as a homeowner, I tried to move a wetlands, and the DEP wouldn't let me if I even was quadrupling the size of the wetlands on my property. They didn't care. And so I think it's a lot harder than we may think. So is there any other takeaway that staff needs to bring back information other than to work with Alan on Alan, you know what, in addition to that, maybe we'll try to just put together, I'll work with Mina and see whether or not we can just put together a simple 1-pager on what Article 97 is, what it takes, what the requirements are, and what the process is. But we'll also reach out and have a conversation with you so we can answer any questions you have. Julie, can you think of anything else that we need? Because those are.
Yeah, those are the
pretty good
biggies. I think it would be helpful and interesting to know from each person's perspective what you absolutely don't want to see happen and what you absolutely do, so that we can factor that into the schematic and get together a cogent, conversation about each of the pros and cons of the designs. So maybe we can put out a quick little, 3-4 question survey questionnaire kind of thing that will help inform the work.
Okay, we can do that. Okay, so I'm going to suggest that those 3 tasks during town meeting is enough that we can do. Let's not
Yeah.
bite off anything more. So this is the, what is it? It's the 29th. Do you think we should just try to meet like once a month? Is that sufficient, or is every other week? I mean, every other week, we may not have time to get a lot of this stuff done, and we may just be looking at partial information. So I'm going to suggest once a month, maybe the last Tuesday of the month. Does that sound good?
It's going to take us at least a month to probably pull all this stuff together.
Yeah.
So that would be helpful.
Why don't we tentatively plan that? I'll have Kathy send out an email to everybody, and I apologize to the Capital Expenditure Committee members and the Finance or Appropriation Committee. We have a couple of different working groups, and somehow you got left off this one, so I was glad you could make it on short notice.
And before we start putting it in our calendar for the last Tuesday of the month, what time? Is everyone good with 3 o'clock?
Works for me. Except, 2 would be better, only because 4 o'clock, I have a standing meeting every Tuesday, but I can move that if 3 o'clock was the only time that worked. And that's just because I feel pushed right now because people are on another Zoom call waiting for me.
Thumbs up for 2 o'clock. Thumbs down. If you don't like it. Oh, okay.
All right, let's shoot for 3, and I'll move my other meeting to 5 when we have meetings. Okay.
Jim,
All right.
are we also going to do a site visit separate
Yes.
from a meeting? Separate from a meeting?
Yes, once the weather gets a little bit nicer.
Okay.
Maybe after our next meeting. And that'll give DPW time. We'll give them a heads up. That'll give them time to get the area mapped off or staked off so we can see what's what. Okay. Well, thank you all. I think this was useful dialogue, and that we've got some homework to do now to bring back, and we'll look forward to the next meeting, continuing the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.